Welcome to the Thrive Careers Podcast, the show that helps you move your career confusion to career success, hosted by the extraordinary Olajumoke Fatoki. If you're ready, let's jump right into it.
Hi, Tim.
I'm doing great. I really do appreciate you having me, on to talk to your community here. It's going to be great.
Beautiful. I'm super excited about this conversation as well, because communication is like the foundation which every other thing rests. So to get us started, I just wanted to ask, so what inspired you to start the Speak with Confidence podcast? Let's start on that.
Well, it really, the journey started a long time ago, really. When the first time that I was ever truly tasked with standing up and giving a speech or a presentation in front of people, the first thing I did was throw up. I knew I was a little bit older. I was an athlete, had been in the military, and I knew how important communication was. So I knew that no matter what I was going to do, I had to get better. And my dream was always to be a teacher. And if you can't stand up in front of students and talk to them, you're not going to be a very effective teacher.
I know.
Again, that journey started a long time ago, and you fast forward to me as a college professor. When students, they have such trouble for whatever reason, whether it's speaking up in class, asking a question, expressing their thoughts, standing up in front of the class and giving a presentation, whatever it is, they struggle so much that I figured that they're not going to be successful no matter what I teach them from a content perspective. Doesn't matter. They're not going to be successful again if they can't communicate their thoughts and ideas. So that's kind of how this all started. And coming to, really near the end of my career as a professor after COVID, the communication skills got so bad. I knew we had to do something. And that's really kind of the impetus of actually pushing forward and getting the podcast started and truly going out and helping people become really more powerful communicators.
Amazing. I love that. And that sort of, draws into my next question, which is, as a confidence coach and a college professor, with over 20 years of experience, how would you define confidence? I always love to start on a note of definition so that, we can build up from there. So how would you define confidence?
That's a really good question that, I don't know that I've given it a whole lot of thought for other people, but, for myself, confidence is the feeling of knowing that you've done everything that you can and are prepared for as best you can be for whatever it is that you're going into. Again, for me in my career, going into a class and teaching a lesson as a professional, providing, products and services and customer service to my clients, being an athlete, doing those types of things, doing the preparation and doing the best that you can, and knowing that you've done the best you can to go out and perform to the best of your abilities. And I think, that to me is really kind of the bedrock is the preparation. Because if you haven't done the preparation, at least for myself, I know that I don't feel good going into whatever it is that I'm going to be doing.
Thank you so much for providing that foundation on which we're going to move this conversation forward. So confidence it's important. It cannot be overemphasized. And for us on this show, it's about helping career professionals land their dream jobs, build thriving careers. So taking away all of those things that can make them get stuck, like not being able to communicate confidently, like not being able to interview confidently. And we'll get into some of those aspects. But for now, why do you think communicating with confidence is such a crucial skill for landing dream jobs and advancing careers?
Well, to me, it comes back to if you don't have some level of self-confidence when it comes across to talking to people. I mean, it comes across that you're I wouldn't say timid, but you're not so sure of yourself. So when you're going into an interview and if you can't sell yourself, why would a company or organization hire you to go out and provide a product or service or whatever it is that company does? If you're not so sure of yourself, you're not going to be able to sell whatever that is, to their customer.
So let's take it a notch further, right? I've had this debate a lot of times in different rooms that I've been in at different points when people ask the question, is confidence something that is innate or something that people can learn? Are people born with confidence or is it a learnable skill? I'd like for you to demystify that for us in this conversation.
You know, I personally think that confidence is something that's learned. When you, almost every podcast I talk about my family. To me, that's what's really important. I'm visiting my grandkids right now, and I look at them just trying new skills, whatever it is. Take tying your shoes, a simple basic skill that everybody has to do at some point in their life. Mm-hmm. And you teach them how to do it, and they get frustrated, and they get frustrated, and they get frustrated. And then when they can do it, the look on their face, the feeling that they have, the joy that they have, that right there, to me, shows you that they've learned something, and they feel good about themselves, and they feel confident now that they can move forward, and maybe struggle a little bit, but they know that they can do it. They've seen it. They've demonstrated it. You know, when we do things that we don't necessarily have to learn or practice, that's just okay, we did it, great, so what? But when it comes to something that is complex, and as we get older, it's the more complex things that we have to do, right? That we have to practice at, that we have to get better at. And communication is something that you have to practice all the time. Your entire life, you're practicing your communication skills, because things change so much and people change so much, and the way we communicate changes throughout our lives. So it's something that must be practiced to be able to have that confidence.
Amazing. So it means that it can be learned, and you can get better with it over time. I love the example you gave, of watching kids learn as little as being able to tie their laces, and how their confidence grows over time when they're able to do it. So it means that confidence is a learnable skill. So this is for our listeners out there, in case you've condemned yourself and you said to yourself, you know what, I don't think this confidence thing is for me. I don't think this communication thing is for me. You've heard it from a college professor. You can learn it.
You can do it. Right.
There's never a time that you feel like you have attained the peak of it. It keeps evolving. You keep getting better at it. I don't know if you have something you wanted to say, add something to that.
Yeah, I mean, again, my background comes from the sport industry, and if you look at the all-time greats in sport, and at least here in the United States, we look at the Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants, the Tiger Woods, the Tom Brady's of the world. They always practiced the basics. No matter how good they were, they knew that you had to continue to work on basic fundamental skills to get better at the more complex skills. Because if you can't master those basic skills, you're never going to master the complex skills. Mm-hmm. And Kobe Bryant, and I can't remember, and so don't quote me on exactly what he said, but he basically said that he practiced, the basic fundamental skills like 30 to 45 minutes before practice actually started, so that he felt confident enough to go into practice with the team, doing the other things that they were actually working.
Fantastic. And I think that's another great layer you've added to this conversation, the importance of practicing. You get better with practice, and that also applies to communication and confidence. Thank you so much for this conversation so far. So moving on, you sort of, gave an hint to this when you started your introduction about some of your students and how some of them have struggles with speaking confidently in front of a crowd, in front of the class. So let's talk about overcoming speaking anxiety. And this is very real. In fact, yes. I used to experience this, sometimes in my career before I started to gain confidence. And I know that a lot of people are still going, through this phase. So many professionals still struggle with speaking anxiety, especially during job interviews. And again, this is my own practical experience. There was a time I realized that I wasn't getting called for the jobs after attending several interviews. And I realized that I wasn't interviewing well. And I went back to the drawing board, to fix that. But I also want to take this, away from here today, because that might be their current struggle. So what are some practical, immediate strategies that you can recommend for people to manage anxiety at this level?
Well, there are many reasons for the anxiety, and I get that, and I understand that. But we have to understand a couple of things and break it down first. Most of the time, the anxiety that we have is self-inflicted. We have the negative self-talk. Am I good enough for this job? Do I have the right skills? I'm nervous. I'm not sure if I'm going to do well. And we start having that negative mindset, and it just starts. And once that starts, it's very, very hard to stop. Even if you're a fairly confident person and you have a lot of skill, once you start negative self-talk, that deteriorates all of the good thoughts that you have much quicker than good thoughts deteriorate negative thoughts. So we have to understand that, and we have to stop having that negative talk. So how do you stop having that negative talk? Just, that I think is the $1 million question. Part of that is in the preparation and in the research. So when you go into an interview, and it could be an interview, it could be a team meeting, it could be anything where you're going in and you've got to share information with other people. You have to prepare. You have to know who your audience is. Who are you going to be talking to? When you go in for an interview, it's not that hard to find out who it is that you're going to be interviewing with. You could be interviewing with 2 or 3 different people. It could be one person. It could be 3 people at one time. But you should have an understanding of who those people are, so that then you can go ahead and craft your answers and craft your thoughts that are going to resonate with them. And that, again, that comes back to the whole practice and preparation piece. There are so many tools out there right now, just from an AI perspective, where you could log on and you could tell them the job that you're applying for, give them your credentials, and then AI will mock interview you and then tell you where you need to improve. And so there's so many more tools today to help people in that job search than when I started out. So that's really part of the preparation piece, is doing the research and then practice. It's critical.
Fantastic. Just to add an extra layer to the AI perspective that you brought to the fore, there are tons of apps that can help people prepare for interviews today and put you in a real life scenario as though you're face to face with your interviewer. You're just speaking to, AI, and it gives people feedback. Okay, so this is what you need to work on. This is, the aspect you need to make your intro stronger. You need to, so there, just to buttress that aspect, that there a lot of, apart from so you started from the mindset thing, this has to do with a lot of mindset, seeing yourself as being able to do what you plan to do or being able to get that job. It begins, with the mind. But apart from that as well, an extra layer to it would also be to, seek for help, like how he has explained. The aspect of preparation, the carrying out your research, knowing your audience and being able to speak to them. I think those are very important aspects of communication. People don't just show up confidently. When you see people who show up confidently, they've done their own work in the background. So, and that reflects when they show up on the outside. So thank you for, taking us through that tip. So moving forward, I'd like for you to share at this point, a personal story or, a client story that illustrates what we are talking about, how you have seen transformation, with a client, especially in the area of their public speaking or communicating with confidence.
Okay, so this is a good one. And it was kind of brought to my attention because I don't know how I forgot about this, but I did. And I'm putting together a mini course, and I'm getting ready to do a presentation on something else. And it was brought to my attention that this happened. So we were I was at a college function, and person I was with, college president came up and had not met this other person. And the college president, they introduced themselves, and the college president literally said, "Tell me about yourself." And the person froze, and she said, "I've always wanted to steal a tasty cake truck." And college president kind of shook his head and turned around and walked away. And I kind of chuckled, and I said, "Why did you say that? Why would you do that?"
Exactly.
And she said she froze. And that right there is truly indicative of how young professionals react, because they're not prepared to even talk about themselves. If you can't talk about yourself, right, and it's your life, and you know who you are, that we have to kind of get to the root of that problem and help them. Now, fast forward, that person is now a real estate agent, and she sells multi-million dollars every year, just from some of the things that we worked on. Being prepared, having a prepared elevator speech for different situations. For a professional situation, for a personal situation, for a social situation. Having something where you don't really have to think about it. You can just say it, and then you can get into that conversation and feel relaxed. And now you can really just start having a normal conversation and not worry about stealing a tasty cake truck.
That's amazing, and a really powerful transformation story indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I love what you said, having different elevation speech for different scenarios, for different aspects of life. And I think that's really crucial. That's really a strategy, that people can employ. And that doesn't make them freeze when they find themselves in such, in such situations, because you said already, you have some lines in your head, and it's easier to build a conversation from this.
Right. And once you start a conversation, everybody starts to feel a bit more relaxed, and then you can just really have a normal conversation with like a normal human person.
Right.
It's not, you don't have to be uptight. It's not, very strict and you have to use perfect words. It's getting over that initial hump of, okay, and now we're talking. And now we're just having a normal conversation.
Absolutely. And, I experienced this in public speaking when, before I start to speak, there are a million and one things going on in my head, but the moment I grab the mic or the moment I start to speak, even in having normal day-to-day conversations with people, even if it's one-on-one, the moment I start to speak, all of that just dispels. And I think that's just what you're trying to say. So, but of course, it helps to prepare. It helps to, have, some sort of things that you would like to talk to people about, ahead of time. And that just helps the conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Thank you so much. And let's move forward. I'm glad we're moving fast on time. So let me get out the next question. So what are the key elements of a clear and impactful message, whether it's in an interview situation, a networking event, or during a workplace presentation? What are those key elements of a clear and impactful message? And
that's a really good question. And I think it truly depends on the situation. I think that first people have to understand what you're talking about. So in other words, what language are you using? Are you using a lot of jargon, or is it plain simple language? Is it actually addressing the issues that they need to be addressed? And is it something that can generally be said in short chunks? Because people can understand and digest short chunks much better than a 5 to 10 minute dissertation of information. So I think it really kind of depends. Again, it goes back to the audience. Are we addressing the audience in the way that they are able to understand what you're talking about? For example, if you're an engineer and you're talking to marketers, you're not going to be able to come in and talk about engineering lingo and terms if these marketers don't understand it. It's not going to make any sense to them. So you have to talk in the language that the audience that you're addressing understands. And it has to actually address the needs that they are looking for. And again, in those chunks of information that they'll be able to digest, understand, and then ultimately use in the future.
Awesome. All right. So a second layer to that question is, in interview situations, I want us to deep dive further into that, because that's really very common. So for job seekers, how can they structure their answers using the STAR methodology framework? STAR: situation, task, action, results.
Yeah. So I think that's a great strategy to use. And I was actually having a conversation about the STAR method with my wife a couple of days ago. And
Interesting.
I think it's a good tactic, but I'm not sure that it's always what's best, because a lot of times if you stick with that method, it just seems so cut and dry. A lot of times there's no story behind it. And I think if you can still use that method and create a story around that method so that it becomes really impactful, that's where you really get the whole idea. That's where especially in an interview, where you're going to make the biggest impact. Because you can just say, this, and this. Okay, that's great. But what was the bigger picture there? And be able to sell that answer in a much better way if you can really kind of develop a story around that method.
Interesting. You kind of peeped into my next question, which is the power of storytelling. Storytelling is such a powerful tool. It's such a powerful communication tool, and it's becoming even more and more popular today, because a lot of people are seeing how powerful and effective it is. You already sort of laid the foundation, so I'm just going to jump to the last question in that set. So for those who are struggling with storytelling, as powerful as it is, a lot of people are still struggling. What's a simple way to start?
That again, these are really good questions. And I think it comes back to you as an individual. And as you begin to, again, for any type of situation that you're in, it's your life. You know your stories, so they can't be wrong. Take the situation and find a time in your life that you can actually relate to that, to be able to answer the question or to make that point. And it can't be wrong. I think, we don't have to, from an individual perspective, we don't have to have, the deepest, darkest history to tell stories. Again, for example, earlier I talked about, I'm going to see my grandkids and talk about tying shoes. How mundane is that? But it gets the point across, right? Another story with my daughter. And see, for me, I pull a lot of my stories from my family and me because it's easy. I know, because I was there. I lived it. And it also gives the audience a little insight into who I am and what's important to me, right? So, for example, my daughter just had my youngest grandson just turned 7 months old. He's got some food allergies. And so she has to be very, very careful about what she eats because she's passing them on, to my grandson. And she told me I could have anything I wanted to eat in the house because I'm staying at her house right now. I said, good. And I opened up the refrigerator and there's only one thing in there. And I know she likes it. And I said, I better call and ask her because, I don't want it, because she can only have some things. I don't want to eat that. And she said, yeah, if I need more, I'll go get more. I said, well, just go ahead and pick up another one because I'm going to eat all of it. And she said, Dad, don't eat all of it. But it's those stories of clarification. It's those stories of connection. It's the stories of, when we're talking about, you ever had blueberry jelly? Blueberry jelly?
Yeah.
So good. It's one of my favorites ever.
Right.
But it's the stories of clarification, from a communication perspective. So let's just say she didn't want me. She said I could have whatever I want, but didn't realize that was in there and was expecting it. Part of it is asking clarifying questions. How important was it for me to ask that question as a just in case if you don't know the answer?
Are you frozen? Okay. I thought your mic was... Oh. Okay. Was that a question for me?
That's a rhetorical question in general.
Okay.
From that communication perspective.
Yeah.
And go back to what I said earlier in terms of students not being willing to ask questions in class or ask questions in an interview or ask questions on the job site, right? It's okay if you don't understand. The best thing to do is ask that question, and then you can move forward. And so that's part of, at least from my perspective, one of the big issues from young professionals. They're not willing to ask questions for whatever reason. It could be anxiety, could be they don't want to sound stupid, whatever. You're not going to sound stupid if you ask a question. I believe that asking questions is what really moves us forward. I say if asking questions makes you look stupid, I'm okay with being the stupidest person in the room, because if something doesn't make sense to me, it doesn't make sense to sit through something and not get clarification.
I think that's a really big point there, because a lot of people, would rather not sound stupid or come across a certain way and just keep quiet, and they keep going in ignorance. And a simple question could have just clarified things. Even in workplace situations, people have made big time errors just because they didn't ask questions for clarity and, to know exactly how to approach the task that has been committed to them. So I think that's a really big one that you just touched on there, being able to ask questions, gain clarity. And, just to add to that as well, I think that if people are nervous about asking questions, it goes back to where we started this conversation from. Maybe you haven't prepared well, because if you are prepared well enough, you would have some level of questions, or some things, that you would like to seek clarifications about, even if it's one. And from one, most times it always leads into many more. And
exactly.
The better questions you ask, the better clarity, you get. Thank you so much, for this conversation so far. Another thing you said about how to tackle storytelling if it's something that is not comfortable for you, that I also picked on is, you didn't call it a strategy, but I think that's a strategy. Finding a comfort zone that you can speak, that you can comfortably speak about. For you, it's family, and, for everyone, it could be your hobby, it could be your family, it could be... I know someone who says that when he gets into public speaking situations, so he's a great singer, but when it comes to speaking, he's nervous. but singing is his natural, that comes to him naturally. So before he goes for any speaking engagements, he sings to himself, as a way of preparing, because that's something that boosts him, and then by the time he gets to the speaking part of it, it comes, with ease.
Yeah, that's a really good strategy. I mean, and like you said, different people have different ways of adapting and dealing with those types of things. And if that works for him, that's great.
Amazing.
There's other people that do deep breathing exercises.
Mm-hmm.
There's other people that do tapping exercise. I mean, it could be whatever works for you. Do it. Lean into it. Embrace it. And if that's what's going to help you move forward, then let's get after it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So now let's talk about the place of verbal cues, things like body language, tone of voice, posture. Do all of those things have any role in communication?
They really do. And I think from a presentation perspective, the body language, those types of things, I think a lot of times we put too much emphasis on it. I think the body language stuff is what gets us, that last bit over the edge, to get our message across. Now, tone, volume, pauses, those things I think are so much more important than people give them credit for. Tone and volume is what really kind of conveys the message. But think about it from a perspective. If you listen to sports on the radio, if the announcer just kept the same tone and volume throughout the entire game, you wouldn't really have any emotion if somebody scores, if there's a good defensive play, whatever it is, it would just be the same. That tone and volume is what really conveys the emotion. Pauses are so important in creating anticipation and driving home a point or getting people on the edge of their seats. So, those types of things, again, really come into play as you're actually practicing before you go in and give your presentation or go to the interview, go to the team meeting, go to the networking event, what have you. So really keep in mind the importance of those types. Amazing.
Thank you. So I don't think I need to flog it, but thank you. So those seemingly unimportant things that people tend to overlook, they actually play a crucial role in getting your communication across. Volume and getting your communication across. Was it tone and volume? Is that what you call it? Tone and volume. Yeah. So those are critical. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So as we round up on this conversation, let's talk about practical exercises that, could you share a quick exercise or activity for our listeners that they can begin to try to improve their communication skills? Is there anything like that?
So practical exercises, I think it really kind of does depend on the individual and where they are and what they really need to work on. I think the biggest thing, I'll come back to is the research and then the practice. And when I say practice, I'm not talking about sitting in your chair, reading your slides. That's not practice. When I'm talking about practice, it's you're delivering whatever piece of information you're going to be delivering in the manner that it's going to be delivered. So if you're standing up in a team meeting at the head of a table, that means you stand up, you're at the head of the table and you have the setup and you go through your information. And that's because from that perspective, that's when you're going to really kind of have an idea about your, that last little bit to get you over the edge, your body language, your movement, especially if you have somebody there that's watching you and watching you or critiquing you, give that information. And so, that to me is probably one of the best things. And if you don't have anybody there, film it. Everybody has a smartphone. Mm-hmm. Set your phone up, film yourself, and watch it. Nobody really likes doing that. Nobody likes watching yourself on camera, but it's going to give you so much more information than if you just go through it by yourself with no critique at all.
Interesting. Putting yourself, that particular environment, Right. Yeah, I'm looking for the word, like a simulated, environment. Right. Exactly.
To
put yourself.
If you can actually get in the room or the actual place that you're going to be doing it to practice, that's even better. But if you can't, set it up in your office, set it up in your home. Have other people watching you do it. It's just so important to the practice because you're going to get some critical feedback.
You took that word right again from my mouth. the practice and the preparation yet again. Yeah. And I think that if I have to redefine what communication is, it would be how much of practice, how much of preparation you've done. That's what makes for, that's what makes for a confident communication. So thank you so much, Tim. One last question. If someone wanted to master confident communication in 30 days, what do you think the first step should be that they should take? What would be a first step that they should take?
I'd say the first step would be to contact me and have a conversation, and we could kind of figure out what's working for you, what's not working for you, and go from there.
Beautiful.
Because everybody starts in a different place.
Mm-hmm.
They really do. Whether you're a young professional, or whether you're somebody that has been in the workforce for 25, 30 years. We all have things that we need to work on. And I don't know that there's ever a simple, one step or one way to do anything for people. Now there's systems out there that will help you, like whether it's Forum for Public Speaking, whether it's the STAR method, those are tips and strategies, but the actual putting things together and delivering them, it's gonna be different for different people.
Great insights there and awesome perspective. So thank you so much, Tim. That brings us to the end of our core conversation today, and we have one rapid fire question just to get to know you more and to bring some form of fun into our conversation today. So what's one advice you would give to your younger self?
Where do I start?
Tell us.
Boy, don't wing it, Pear. That's every time in my life that I've just winged it. It's never worked out. It's never worked out, ever. And again, where do I start? I got a whole list of things, of things that I've said or done. I look back and said, Tim, what are you doing? What are you thinking? But, you can still be yourself. So I'm the type of person, I like to have fun in what we do because life's too short to be serious all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't take myself seriously, but I take what I do seriously. And
absolutely.
It's okay to have fun at work. It's okay to have fun as you're doing things. And it's okay when you screw up to look back and say, wow, you screwed up, and you laugh a little bit and you fix it and you move on. And that's it, I guess. Don't wing it and have fun. How about that?
Lovely. Don't wing it. Prepare.
Exactly.
No better way to end this conversation than on that amazing note. And thank you so much, Tim, for being on the conversation today, for joining us on the Thrive Careers podcast. You've covered so much today, from overcoming speaking anxiety to using storytelling, crafting compelling messages, mastering non-verbal and verbal communication. And if you're listening to this, I'll just say one thing. Start applying every one of these strategies and you will start to see massive shifts in how you communicate. And one thing, that has stood out today as well, for master communicators, those to admire, preparation and practice. Okay, if you would leave this, if you're not going to take anything away from this podcast today, do not forget those two things. Preparation and practice. Thank you so much. So, Tim, if there's one final piece of advice you would like to give to professionals who want to boost their confidence and communication skills, what would that be?
Again, go to timnewmanspeaks.com and reach out to me, and we can work something out, and I can help you get on the road to becoming a more powerful communicator.
Amazing. So I think you already answered part of the next thing which I was going to say. So where can people find you? How can they connect with your work and, get to meet you? Don't share that.
So the best place is I should know my own website. It's timnewmanspeaks.com or LinkedIn, and it's just Tim Newman, and you'll see this face there.
Okay.
So if that's a good thing or not. But
about your formula for public speaking course as well, how can they...
So that's on the website as well. The Forum for Public Speaking, it's kind of a step-by-step process to help build that confidence and give you that formula that if you repeat that formula every time, it's going to become second nature, and you're going to get rid of a ton of that anxiety because you're going to be prepared and be able to go into pretty much any type of interaction, interpersonal, public speaking on the stage, team meeting, networking event, interview, what have you, with a ton more confidence.
Amazing. Thank you so much. What a way to end this conversation. So if today's episode resonated with you, be sure to subscribe to Thrive Careers podcast and share this episode with a friend, and connect with us on social media. Your voice matters, and confident communication remains a superpower. Thank you so much for today. Thank you, Tim. And we've come to the end of this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I really do appreciate being able to share with the Thrive Careers Hub community.
Thank you. All right. So officially, this episode is done. From this point, I'm just going to let you know what the next steps is going to look like. So most likely in the month of April, maybe towards the end of April, that's when an estimated release date would be. But I'll be in your, I'll share the details with you via email. And I always make a ask of my guests as well to be involved in the engagement, in the promo, of the podcast. Yeah. So I'm definitely going to use everything I have, and the same for you as well, so that we can maximize the reach. And this is such a rich conversation, a very critical one at that. So I'd like for us to get the message out as much as possible. So I'll communicate with you via email, the platforms that I use. And I think I'll also find you on LinkedIn and follow you already. Okay. So I'll share snippets with you. I'll share the final production. So I usually load them on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and from Apple Podcast, it goes to other distributions that are linked to Apple Podcast as well. So that's like how it's going to flow from my end. I don't know if you have any question, or also I'm willing to take, if you have links, that you want me to include in the description. That's fine by me. I'm willing to do that. So you can also share that with me via email, and I'll be sure to incorporate that.
Yeah, I'll send you. I'll send you the links to website and LinkedIn for you to share. And I don't know if you do any reels, I'd be happy to share them out as well. And anything that you send me, I'll get out and share. I mean, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm sharing everybody's stuff all the time. That's really kind of what I do.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Tim. Enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah. Bye.
I'll talk to you soon. All right.
And regards to your family.
Thanks. Tell them good luck. Bye.
And that's it for today's episode of Thrive Careers Podcast. I'm Olajumoke Fatoki, reminding you that no matter where you are in your career, you have the power to rewrite your story. If you've enjoyed today's insights, do not forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who's ready to thrive. If you have questions or topics you would like for me to cover, let's connect. I'd love to hear from you. Remember, clarity creates confidence, and confidence leads to success. Until next time, stay inspired and keep thriving.